Imperial was founded by Bill Lynch, has businesses in logistics, car rental, tourism, financial services, vehicle distribution and retail. Imperial operates in South Africa, Africa, Europe and Australia. The company has a market cap of 38 billion rand, a dividend yield of 3% and a price to earnings ratio of 13. Do we have appetite for Imperial at the high level?
Yeah, the thing is, it's a great company, but it's run quite strongly, and 13, as the PE you mentioned, is pretty much where the mean reverting PE is. One thing to consider about Imperial is the fact that it's quite exposed to the consumer. Exclude the German business, and most of its business is to the consumer. And if you look at it from that way, one can almost think to yourself, why is it not behaving like a retailer? It has a large retail car business, etc. And if you look at the retail, for instance, PE ratios, they're significantly higher, and that may be something to consider. But if you just look at historic PEs, 13 is pretty much where it is. Unless you look at a re-rating of those PEs, it's probably higher at the moment.
It is a well-diversified group, Paul, though.
I like it a lot. A couple of years ago, before the fall, by which I mean the big crash of 08-09, I tried to convince my colleagues that we should add it as one of our recommended stocks.
And you didn't win the argument.
I didn't win the argument, and thank goodness I didn't, because then the crash came and they really, really plummeted. This is way back here before the graph starts.
All right, so bad timing on your front. Thank goodness your colleagues didn't.
So they were at like 180, 190, and then they fell all the way back down there to the 70s, but they've since done very well. But I like Hubert Brody, the new CEO, younger. I mean, he took over in an unenviable position from Bill Lynch, who died, and Bill Lynch was the founding father of this group and had really built it up. But I like the businesses that they've kept, and I was very pleased to see them sell the aircraft and air leasing and air maintenance businesses, the old SAF Air business, and then also the very capital-intensive businesses, which were the stuff that they pushed out into extra, the machinery
so
leasing
you like
stuff.
Their focus now.
And then they got out of the Imperial Bank thing and gave that to Nedbank, which I think was also a good idea. So the resultant group I like a lot.
Viv, it's expensive, as you said, at a 13 PE. If you saw a pullback, and quite a significant pullback, would Imperial be one of the stocks that you invest in?
Well, most certainly. I think they've done great. I mean, their retail car business with Kia and Hyundai has done extremely well. Those two brands, by the way, have taken a massive chunk out of South Africa's market share, and surprising considering just like where they were a few years ago on no one's radar. So the company is a great company. My only fear is looking at the kind of move we've had recently, is there much more upside from here? And I don't think there is unless you have a re-rating of that PE ratio.
Is there a chance of a re-rating, Paul? If we're sitting on a 13 PE, the stock pretty much going up in a nice little line here.
Look, in the right kind of economy, this kind of stock does very well. So if there's an economic boom going on, I'm not really...
Can you see an economic boom out there? I don't know whether we can.
Sure. There's always an economic boom. It's just around the corner. I mean, the global economic expansion is running at about 4%. We know that there's lots of talk about, who's going to do what next, Europe, US, China. But I'm of the view that the business as it's spread out now with the big business in Europe is well positioned. I like that. And I actually don't like the auto retail business. That's just too chunky. It's just too margin dependent and it's too dependent on economic cycles. The businesses I like are the logistics and distribution businesses.
However, we still know that Imperial is going to react to the economy, and of course Paul in his infinite wisdom expects a boom out there. That's not the reality. We're going to see tougher times. Could we see the stock coming under pressure as a result?
Yes, if you see interest rates come and increase over the next few years, you might see that happen. If you see the consumer take a bit of a downturn, as you might expect if the global economy does begin to go back to where it was in 2008, and some people fear that could be occur if we have a real meltdown in, for instance, China or in Europe, then of course we would see Imperial with its large exposure to the consumer do rather badly as well. And one other thing to note, which is obviously a bit more out there, is the fact that Transnet, we're looking at the logistics sector, is embarking on a massive hundreds of billions of rands of expenditure in terms of capex, trying to move things off the road onto the trains. If that does succeed, obviously it will have an impact on a company like Imperial with its logistics business.
You mean a negative impact
Yes.
on Imperial because everything's moving to rail?
Yeah.
That's a big concern, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I mean, a decade or three ago, there was a law in South Africa that you were not allowed to move anything outside of a magisterial district except on the spoorweg, on the train. Then they, went into a long-term decline. Now you can't drive anywhere in South Africa without riding up the back of a truck. Whether or not it will ever go back to rail, I'm not sure, because the nice thing about trucks is that you can manage it yourself and you can do everything short-term. Remember, in the old days, retailers and wholesalers basically organized their own affairs. Now nobody ships anything. If you're a new retail brand that's coming into the market, then what do? You contract with DHL or someone to deliver your stuff. So I must say, I think this industry's still got great growth. And I want to put one other thing on the table. I haven't spoken to Hubert for about a year, but when I last did, he kind of insinuated that Imperial is a group that either wants to do some big transformative purchase or potentially a big transformative sale. So at 38 billion rand market cap, they're kind of chunky enough to go and buy the logistics
But then
business.
do you bet on it because of the corporate action and the potential upside out of that?
Good question. I always say you cannot buy anything in anticipation of corporate action because who knows? I mean, you could be waiting forever.
Viv agrees with you.
Yeah.
You're nodding away
Yes,
there.
probably. And especially in this environment here, I mean, if you do see an economic downturn, most of companies in a similar field are going to be looking more as hunkering down as opposed to trying to buy someone else.
If we look at how all these companies have refocused, unbundling those assets that they don't like, is there room for for further focus within the Imperial Group, or is this pretty much it? This is what the group is going to look like going forward.
Because some of the businesses there, look, they've got a financial business, in other words, an insurance-related operation. They had the bank. They owned half of Motor Finance Corporation. So there's all that kind of stuff going on. So maybe they could be a bit smaller there, because you either got to be in that financing stuff or not at all. The tourism-related business, the car rental business, I don't know, those are quite good businesses as well. So I think the portfolio as it stands is probably about the right size. Maybe they could shed a few of the weaker auto dealership relationships, with car manufacturers that they don't think are up to scratch. But on the whole, I think they're well positioned.
Imperial, hot or not, Viv?
A great company, unfortunately, this price, not hot.
Paul Theron, hot or not?
Great company, and at this price, definitely hot.
Definitely hot. Well, there we've got it.